Everybody, welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, your host, registered dietitian and intuitive eating counselor. And today I have on Caryn Gutman. Hi, Caryn.
Hi.
Nice to see you again. I just came to your live IFS parenting class and I loved it. And I'm so excited to have you on. So please tell the listeners a little bit about you, where do you live, and what do you do?
Okay. Firstly, I'm so honored to be here and to have met you. So thank you so much for coming the other day and asking me to do this. So I work in Cedarhurst and I live in the Five Towns as well. I am an IFS therapist. So I'm a trauma therapist. I primarily use IFS. I would say I also strongly use um, attachment theory and attachment strategies. I do premarital counseling. I do parenting. I work with teens and adults, as well as couples and families.
Wow. Okay, amazing. Do you work in person or virtually or both?
Both. I work in private practice and totally open to virtual or in person.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so tell us, how did you get into therapy? Like, did you know you always wanted to be a therapist? Did you know you always wanted to do IFS? And I'll ask you more specifically what IFS is, even though I did interview another IFS therapist, but still, I want to hear your take.
Sure. Okay, so I think I was 17 when I decided I might be a therapist. I wanted to be a therapist, a lawyer, or a fashion designer when I graduated high school.
Okay. I could see
Mm,
that being like, all like you could do all three, I guess,
They do. You all really have, I would say, similarities. And I would see therapy, which I'm really happy about, is sort of the middle, um, in the at the bridge between the creativity and the intellectual. That's kind of how I see it, where it really allows me to utilize both sides, which is a lot about IFS. It's all about finding the gray, finding the middle,
Mhm.
utilizing, your different parts. And I worked in fashion for a bit, and I found that that world was just very challenging. I so appreciate anybody who works in that. The creativity is amazing. Um, when I worked there, like there was just a lot of cutthroat that I just felt like I don't want to push my way into this. This just isn't going to fulfill other parts of me. Law, I never really pursued. Um, and therapy, I was always interested, really, really curious. I would say the curiosity really stuck out to me. I wanted to know what makes people the same, what makes people different. Like, how do we get to do the things we do? Which is a lot of what interested me in IFS. So, IFS, actually, my former supervisor, um, Dr. Naftali Reichman, he was utilizing IFS. He told me a lot about it. And the more I worked with him, the more intrigued I became in learning it. And I trained with IFS Israel, which is an amazing community. And IFS is a really non judgmental way of understanding people and really coming at it through compassion and curiosity for we all do the best we can to survive, to not feel pain, to get by. Some of those strategies, those parts of us have been tremendously helpful and it's easy to see. Some of them really worked at a time and a place and they don't feel as helpful now. And I love taking a look with people at like, but why originally? Why do we have this part? How did we create this? What's the need behind this? How were we trying to just protect ourselves? And can we come to any part of ourselves through that place?
Okay, so you knew that you wanted to be a therapist from the time that you were 17 around, like you weren't sure of fashion or law. I could see the creative side of you that sees that all those three things could connect as a dietitian. Because like I'm a dietitian, but I love the science behind nutrition, but like I really love the creativity behind cooking and baking and also working with people. There's like so many overlaps. The lawyer part is really interesting, but I don't know anything about being a lawyer, but I could see that as a lawyer, you probably have to understand people very well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I also have a strong analytical part, which when I first went into therapy, that's what I thought it was. That's what I thought we were doing. And a lot of what I learned in grad school was that
Mhm.
you put together people's stories, you're going to find the puzzle pieces. And IFS has helped me really work on that part of myself to say, I don't have to lead anybody anywhere. I don't have to figure out because your dad was like this, that's why you do that. I can help people come to that in their way if they need to. We don't have to make the whole puzzle fit all the time. IFS has been a real breather for me. Sort of the concept in IFS for the therapist is you facilitate, you help somebody go inside themselves and bring compassion toward the parts of themselves and recognize them. You don't need to make all the connections for them. You don't need to even, you're not there to heal them. You're there to help them heal themselves. And at first that was like hard to understand because it's so not how I was taught. And it wasn't part of, like, there was a part of me who originally went into it to sort of maybe, figure it out for people. And it's been such a relief to not figure it out for anybody, or to allow that part of myself to relax a little more. She has great ideas. I utilize her. Sometimes she's like figured something out that's very helpful and I'll write it down in my notes, but I don't have to take over for anybody. Like, I can just help people help themselves.
So I have a question on that. So I'm not a therapist at all, but as a dietitian, I guess I am trained to counsel people and to help people make connections. Like, I kind of wish I did have like that training. I wish they would offer that as a dietitian slash therapist in some capacity, although they do not. But I think they're thinking about it in the nutrition world. But I know, like, from working with a lot of people and working with their therapists, and I have a lot of friends who are therapists. They have taught me that, like, that's why, let's say, EMDR is so helpful, or somatic is so helpful in trauma work, because people don't have to talk about the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, as you're talking about IFS, do you feel, and you said like you feel like this sense of relief that you don't have to figure it out for them. Do you feel like that there's connection there? Like before you, I'm just going to say the word unburden because it's just coming to mind. I don't know if that really works here, but before you unburden that for yourself, like, I'm the therapist, I'm the fixer, and now you're like, no, I'm not, I'm the guider. Do you think that all, do you see the connection there between, like, helping people, like, talk about things, working things out, and also being like, I'm just here to guide you, but you don't necessarily have to, I don't have to make the connection for you, or you don't have to necessarily talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So actually something I learned in IFS that I like in training was that you don't, even IFS, which is more talk like
Right.
than EMDR, let's say, or
Yeah.
somatic,
Right.
people don't have to out loud relive the trauma to you.
Mhm.
They what's called their self energy. They inside themselves will make connections. And if they don't feel comfortable sharing it with the therapist, they don't have to in order to heal. But what happens for the therapist, or what we work on as IFS therapists, I would say, is when I recognize that I don't have to hear the story, I'm open to witnessing. If it's going to help you heal, to have my presence be there for you, I'm happy to witness toward your healing and have you witness your parts of yourself for your healing, which opens my heart rather than opening just my brain of I have to take down this story. I have to be busy with figuring it all out for you. Now my heart can just be open to your story in a way where you're sharing with me. And what's happening more is the human connection. We
Mhm.
are connecting. We are two adults hearing your like childhood story from a new perspective, and we're really both taking it in, and we're really both feeling into it, and that in itself will create a lot of healing rather than my need to make all the kind of intellectual connections for you.
That's interesting. I like that a lot. I think that, I don't know if you see this a lot, but I see this with myself and with other people in my life, that, like, in the beginning of, like, their healing journey. I'm 35, so I've been, like, in and out of therapy since I was, like, I want to say 18. So when I was 18, it was like all talk therapy, you know? That was,
Mhm.
I don't know what IFS, and I had never heard of. I had never heard of EMDR. I had never heard of somatic. Now these things are very big. I did actually, when I was maybe like 25, I became very interested in Parallel Abramowitz' work, and she was talking a lot about inner child work, which was very new then, 10
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's like everybody's talks everybody talks about it like it's so normal, like, oh, what does your inner child think, you know? But then it was, I feel like it was very revolutionary what she brought to the world of healing in the Jewish world. Maybe it was in the non-Jewish world as well, but for sure into the Jewish world. Are you familiar with parallel Ramowitz?
I'm not specifically. I know inner child work, and it's similar to IFS. It's not exactly the same. I would say that IFS would say they're inner children, inner teens, inner like every age.
Yeah.
Um, right? So it's a little different, but there's a similar concept, and I really appreciate. I think I don't know her by name or I don't recognize it, but I've certainly heard her work, and I really really appreciate it. And when anything comes to the Jewish community, I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Right? Been around longer overall, but I'm very anybody who brought it to our community.
Yeah, so I don't think she's an actual therapist. I guess I would call her more a coach, but she it does a lot of parenting stuff and she does her class was is called self-parenting. Okay, so this was I want to say this came out like 15 years ago, which is like it really was very revolutionary. And I took her course when I was newly married, had two little kids, and I was like, whoa, this is what I need, you know? And I know that that's not the same thing as IFS, and IFS I learned along that healing journey, which I'm still on. But um, I think that it's like, yeah, so in the beginning, I was like, I need to talk about my feelings. I need to talk about what happened. I need to process it. I need to get to the bottom of it. Right. And then I heard a lot about how, like, you don't have to, like, be in therapy for 40 years or 100 years. Like, you don't have to talk about the same thing and relive your childhood and whatever. And then I heard a lot about, EMDR and trauma therapy and not necessarily having to relive the trauma. Um, and it's like fascinating because I feel like the world is accepting that now. Like the world is coming to believe that now.
Yeah, because also a lot of research has come out. I don't know how long, I'm not good with like how many years, but in for sure the last 10, that a lot of what really, again, was people really meaning well was causing a lot of reliving trauma. And again, from an IFS perspective, if you're telling it from like what would be called like a narration part, you're not getting to that, what you would call, let's say, an inner child. You're not getting to that part who's really holding the memory. So the narration part is just like keeps telling it, let's say, and you're still not reaching it. So there's like a specific path in IFS that you want to do to really, that's not so much about telling it, but really it's in a very specific way. And there are steps that get to it and can heal. And like the word you used before, unburden. It's not about the sort of classic retelling, which through research, which again is how science changes, which is how things change, is that we try things. And, back in the day, people were really, really trying. They really wanted to heal people. And through a lot of research, they realized that some of what was happening in talk therapy was causing people to relive and re traumatize rather than heal, which helped develop something like IFS to recognize how much do we have to tell, what are the steps, what rewires the brain. And IFS is a lot about rewiring the brain, changing what happens with the memories and when you retell them in a specific way with this witnessing. That's a huge part of IFS. When you feel completely witnessed, you don't have to keep retelling. And that's kind of how you process in IFS. That's not, oh, it's 10 sessions of reprocessing, or processing and retelling over and over. We don't want people to feel they have to do that.
Did you practice as a regular therapist before you became trained in IFS, or you went straight to IFS training?
No, so I worked a long time before I learned IFS. So I was trained in psychodynamic therapy, CBT, Gestalt, which is a little like it's not IFS, but it has like the concept kind of parts, and family therapy, which also is before IFS, before internal family systems came external family systems. So
Right.
I would say that I had a leaning toward that. My first work was with OHEL. I worked in domestic violence and foster care. So I had, on the job sort of family uh, trauma work that I was working with. And then I had the background of family therapy that I was trained in. I also went for a year to study at the Ackerman Institute for Couples and Family. So I was always leaning toward couples and family. And I think a lot of what I loved about IFS is taking that family work and turning it inside.
So I'm just going to share this from what I know from my own research for the listeners who aren't familiar. I think Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS, from what I listened to a bunch of his podcasts, I was really into it for a while. I have to get back into it, but you re-inspired me. I heard him. I think I heard him on a podcast with Tim Ferriss. Do you like Tim Ferriss? I love Tim Ferriss. Okay, whatever. He's like more a business person, but
Yeah.
I believe his story was that he was sexually abused as a very young child, maybe two or three, and through IFS, like he was working on healing, and they do. I don't know how you feel about this, but they do like a live session together. It's very interesting. And so from what I understand, you could totally correct me if I'm wrong, but Richard Schwartz was working as a couples therapist, and then he developed the concept of IFS that we have our own, meaning there's the external family system of husband, wife, child, father, grandfather, whatever. And then he's like, but I noticed within a person they have their own parts that their own younger child, older child, baby, sibling, whatever. I don't know that much I know what I know from reading. I'm not a therapist, but I'm saying the firefighters and the managers and that is how he developed the idea, which is super, super interesting and creative.
Yeah, yeah, he was doing external family therapy and then he turned it inward, and it's a concept that had some existence. I love his particular way. I think it's very intuitive and you know um, can be understood by everybody, and he has a way of giving it over to really help like non-therapists learn it and therapists learn
Yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
love that because I'm a believer that IFS is for everybody or can be for everybody. It doesn't have to be a cup of
Right.
tea, but I think there are pieces of it that anybody can appreciate. um, and it really spoke to me. I would say, for as long as I can remember, I'm one of three girls. That's my original family. So I was always very intrigued, I think, because we were all the same gender, sort of very into birth order.
You do middle?
Sorry. No, I'm
Oldest?
youngest.
Oh, the youngest. Okay, wow. I always like to guess birth orders also. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I was really always obsessed with it. Again, so I am one of three girls. My father is one of three boys. So there was like sort of a model in our family, right, for birth order because gender was taken out of it. So like you could see sort of, right? What did these oldest, middle, youngest, what do they look like? So I was always really, really intrigued by that. And something about like Richard Schwartz, creating the system of like you have that going on inside, like really spoke to me of like, oh, and I felt that the more I learned it, the more I would see how my parts are coming up all day, every day. And it changes my interaction with people. I will say that I also see it. There's so much overlap with Torah, like the concept of what bothers you in somebody else is something going on for you.
Mhm.
Um, I always felt that always I don't remember like which parsha that comes from, but I think it's Pirkei Avos maybe, but that always like really sat with me. And that idea that your family members, your friends, like when something about them is hurting you in a place or something, that's an opportunity to turn inward and ask like, do I have a part like that? What does it need my care? Because we don't tend to be, not to use an overused word, but triggered unless there's something going on for me as well, and maybe there's some similarity there or some difference there that's worth turning inward and looking at. So when I learned the concept, it just really spoke to me.
So how long were you practicing regular therapy before learning IFS, like give or take?
Um, Before learning about IFS at all, I think I would say 6 years.
Wow. So could you speak to me a little bit about the difference in terms of I don't want to say length of treatment. I know people are always like, how long will it take to heal me forever? But like, do you notice that people can leave therapy earlier? Do you notice that people are able to utilize skills easier? Like, what do you see as a difference?
Um, right. So that's really hard to say. And again, as a trauma therapist, people come in and out, and it depends on so many factors that I couldn't really speak to length. But I would say that what
Not
I like,
length, but let's say effectiveness. I would say effectiveness.
yeah. Um, I think that it has a certain roadmap in a way that I can also explain to my clients. I'm a huge believer in transparency. I think I was utilizing that before, but because there's a specific methodology I'm using, like not everybody has to do this. It's not necessary for IFS, but I will often explain what I'm doing when I'm doing it. Not that we go in like without explaining it at all, but meaning I'm very into psychoeducation. So I would say that I um, have a part that like really wants to help people understand if they're interested. It's not, again, it's not completely necessary. Everybody does enough disclosure, for ethics, but I happen to really have a psychoeducation part. Again, I read the room. If somebody is just like I agree to what is going on and I understand it enough and I don't really want to understand, like my parts don't require me to totally understand what you're doing, then we let it be, and it's very, very experiential.
Right.
But I like to educate people if they're interested. And so there's like an openness to, this is the modality, this is what we're looking to do, this is how it fits like the story you've given me. Um, so it also is something that people can work on outside of therapy once, because the language is so, I find like, I'll talk to my kids from that language and they can use it and they like it. And I hear it more and more just being used without people realizing it. I have friends who laugh at me. I'll say, a part of me felt really hurt when you said that. And they'll be like, a part of you said that. And then later they're talking to me and they're like, yeah, so sometimes part of me feels like this and part of me, and I was like, oh, you're doing it too. It's everybody, it's everywhere. You just, it's really like the word that comes back a lot in IFS is noticing,
Right.
and gives people the tools to really be able to notice, so that therapy can also be utilized for kind of the witnessing and kind of sometimes like the bigger, harder. It doesn't feel safe to go there alone. And then a lot of working with parts can be done outside of therapy, sort of the parts that we're more used to, like you mentioned before, like some of the managers, like my timekeeping part, which is not necessarily holding so much trauma. At times, I can work with that outside of therapy too, and we can give people tools for that. So, again, it's not also everything has to happen in therapy.
So could you share a little bit about the roadmap, like in terms of using IFS in therapy? Like when you say roadmap, like does something come to mind for you?
Um, I wouldn't say that it's always a specific order. I would say that when we're healing like very traumatized parts, there it's hard to get into just because it's a little bit like therapy
Could
speak.
be. No, well, you could. First of all, I love therapy speak, and second of all, if you want to explain it, you can. But I'm saying, let's say you wanted to use like a made up example, like um, I'm not thinking of any client specifically, but if you wanted to think about like just because of the purpose of this podcast of somebody who struggled with, let's say, body image or overeating or undereating, restricting, right? So let's say I'm making it up. I'm totally making it up. But let's say they come to you and they are not coming to you for body image work or overeating or restricting because that's not your area of expertise, but it comes up like let's say I'll tell you for example what comes up in my sessions a lot is that I'm working with somebody who is struggling to sit at the dining room table
Mhm.
or who is um struggling to eat or struggling to stop eating, right? So they might not tell me this session number one or session number two, they might, but there's they were not welcome at the dining room table. Let's say, you
Mhm.
know, advertently or inadvertently, meaning they were fighting with their siblings and then they were kicked out of the dining room table on Shabbos. Okay, so now they hate the Shabbos meal. And or lots of sexual abuse, lots of physical abuse, right? So I can't feed my physical body because it's not worthy, right? I need to overfeed my body because I don't want anyone to touch it, right? So that's what comes up in my sessions. Again, I'm not a therapist, but these are often the type of people who come to me because they've tried every diet and they know what to eat and they feel really stuck.
Yeah. Okay. So when I say roadmap, thank you. That helps. Is that we in IFS one really important step is you work with what's called protectors first. So those are like you named before the managers and the firefighters. So that means we don't directly go to the pain, right? We don't directly go to the stories of sexual or physical abuse. We don't go to the unworthy right away. Feeling, parts that hold those kinds of feelings, they are kind of the mason jar holders of tremendous pain, and they absolutely deserve their healing. But if we go directly to them, the system will be on overload, right? Because they've been working so hard to push that pain down. So
Mhm.
we would go to like the protectors. So often the parts around, let's say, like calorie counting or food restriction, exercise, sometimes just sort of like perfectionist qualities, right? Those are the protectors. They keep the mind busy so it can't go to the sort of really painful stories. It's less painful to count calories than it is to think of sexual abuse.
Mhm.
Um, and it's genius. And that's the IFS perspective, is sort of how smart is your brain that something so terrible happened to you so young that you created a system that would keep your mind so busy that you wouldn't go back there. And it's very interesting for people because they might really struggle with their calorie counting part. It's also painful, and it is.
Very
Uh, Hard to be the kid, and I've seen this, right? Just community wise, like I've seen
getting
little
well. thinking about it. It's very emotional for me.
Yeah, I've seen little girls who are scared to take a cupcake at a birthday party. You can see that already working.
So sad.
Arts as adults who understand somewhat of what could be going on, right? And there's endless possibilities in terms of the pain behind that and what system is created. And then, what protector parts have been even created by society
Hmm.
that, right, if I eat this, other people might be judging me. So I've created a system where I don't eat it, but I'm also a child. And this is hot pink. And who doesn't want to pick up something hot pink with
Right.
frost and eat it?
And not only that, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. You don't take it, and then your aunt is like, "That's such a good choice, yay!" And it's like,
Yeah.
you just say that to a 6-year-old, you know?
And the interesting thing is sometimes when I take enough of a step back, I look at that aunt and I think, what was her past? Did she
Right.
wish her it was a good choice because she wasn't able to do that and she had tremendous pain being like made fun of for eating or gaining weight or all
Mm-hmm.
the food is nowhere near simple. It really almost never is. No matter the size of the person, no matter what their history is, like I just find that when people start talking about food, there's like so many possibilities of parts and types of parts.
Yeah.
The idea is we first start with protectors. They always have a concept of protection. So even a 6 year old calorie counting or eating the cupcake, not eating the cupcake, sticking their hand out toward the cupcake, pulling their hand back. Something is happening there where they are working on protecting themselves. So we have compassion, curiosity, appreciation toward the protection. And then we also might want to help them feel feel more free to
Mm-hmm.
make a choice from a place of really understanding whether or not in this moment it feels most right. That's kind of the terms in IFS. Nothing is right or wrong. It's most right in this moment. It just feels most right to me in this moment to eat this, not to eat this. I
Mm-hmm.
get it when I eat pink dye, so it feels most right to me not to eat it. But I totally appreciate my fun loving part that wanted to eat a cupcake at a birthday party. And I also appreciate my part that reminded me that I am allergic to gluten and held me, right? Like there's endless possibilities in the world we live in, but it's just appreciating that all the parts are there to protect. And then behind the protection, which again is a slower process, we want to get to the pain and unburdening the parts that have pain.
So, in terms of the roadmap, what I'm hearing is that you will, like, I get this, that like I also will not like go straight directly to the pain, and I try really hard not to obviously challenge my clients, but not too much, you know? And also like I will tell them like take this to your therapist if I feel like it's out of my scope. But it sounds like, as somebody comes to you and you're working on like I guess what brought them to therapy, and then let's say it's like they think they came for this reason, but then you start with like the most outer surface thing that's going on, right? And then you work like on each individual part, meaning like they came in, they were talking about this part, then you activated this part, then you're going to go work on this part, and then you come back to that in the next session, or they're holding, like they're spending time with that part over the week. Like how does that work?
Yeah, so IFS is really not so exact, and I'm sure everybody has their own way. But the idea also in IFS, because it's so appreciative of each individual system's protections, so it's sort of like the protectors are a little bit of an alarm system,
Mhm.
but the code can kind of keep changing. So I am open, or I try to be open every session to whichever protector kind of comes up. So sometimes a client will say to me, "Can we go back to what we were talking about last week?"
Mhm.
And please check inside that all your parts want to do that. Because sometimes there's a part that like really wants to move forward. So it wants to go back. And another part's like, that was actually very overwhelming for me. I don't want to go back to that. And we
Mhm.
check. That's a huge thing in IFS is checking inside, making sure parts are on board for this conversation, whatever conversation we're having. And always, always, as the therapist, checking. Are all the parts on board for this conversation? Is a protector sort of in the way, meaning they're coming up? So, for example, a client will get distracted. In IFS, nothing's a coincidence. If you are distracted, so a client might say, "I'm having such an ADD moment, like I can't process anything you're saying." Okay, something like ADD would be considered a part. So right now, a part of you is coming up to distract. Can you check in with that part of yourself that it wants to have this conversation, or is it letting me know? And I
Mhm.
so appreciate it as my partner. I say that sometimes to people, that maybe this conversation, it's not the right time and you don't feel so open to this right now. Can you check in with that part if it wants me to just change to a different conversation? Is that, like what? And sometimes someone will say, "Oh yeah, I just got less distracted." Right? That part, like that. It didn't want to go there today. So
Right. Yeah.
also time and place. So we don't just go back. And in terms of roadmaps, I didn't mean in any sort of straightforward way. It's sort of the
No,
base.
that spoke to me because I don't know why that spoke to me so much. Not because I think like that maybe because we all just want a roadmap so badly to heal. So it just spoke to me so much. But anyways, I continue. Sorry.
Very experiential and open. So the roadmap is sort of like, I'm noticing with my clients along the way, that's probably a source of pain that came up for a moment. That's somewhere we may eventually go. And here's a protector, here's a protector. But always protectors first and making sure protectors are on board. When the protectors are on board, the system just feels really ready and really comfortable to move forward. And again, if protectors are not on board, they're going to come up anyway, as they're supposed to do. And I really have, the more years I do IFS, recognize them as my helpers. If
Hmm.
mine is distracted and I don't notice it, but
Hmm.
happening in a way where like now I do, I realize they were about to get overwhelmed, which then they weren't going to be open to witnessing, with themselves what they needed to. So it wasn't going to give them the healing that they really wanted. So this distractor is on board to let me know it's not the time and place to go there. So we can sort of have an X marks the spot all over the place, but we don't like walk toward X all the time. We're checking, right? We're checking with the forest and we're checking with the beach, right? Like I'm literally giving a treasure map here. And we're checking the different spots to make sure everybody's on board, because what it feels like when everybody's on board is just like so much more harmonious in the system, which allows for that much more healing.
Right. That's interesting. I'm just thinking for a second. I'm processing what you said. Um, I think that the roadmap thing just like, I don't know, like hit me because it's so hard to feel like just from my own personal perspective. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I think that clients who come to me are just very similar to me. Like I get them, right? Because I'm like a little bit out of the box dietitian. I try not to be so black and white about this, but I don't really help people lose weight. So like, for the last few years when people would call me and say I want to lose weight, I'd be like, I don't help people lose weight. And then like now I'm realizing like I really shouldn't say things like that because like even that there's nuance. I don't help people lose weight. But if people want to come to me and that's their goal, I'll tell them you can have whatever goal you want. That might not be, I don't want you to be so focused on it. I don't want it to be, you can work on your health without working on your weight. It's hard for people to believe that, especially when doctors tell them that's not true, or everybody tells them that's not true. Or I find that we were speaking a little bit before we started recording that just, you know, everybody wants to lose weight. So it's just hard when everybody around you is like, I don't know if this is true for you. I just feel like for me at least, many people around me are talking about weight loss, dieting, their kids not eating foods, their kids losing weight. Um, it's just everywhere. I don't know. So it's really hard I think the people who come to me, we call it like hitting diet rock bottom. Like you've been dieting for 30 years. You've tried all the diets. This has nothing to do with your willpower. This has nothing to do with you being lazy. You're not lazy. This is like the culture that we live in that's told you that you're a failure. So when people come to me and they've accepted that on some level, they're ready to do the work. Not everybody is ready for that.
Yeah, right. So what I love about what you said is you said, I'm not black and white. I think in any profession, if we can come to a place of gray, it is extremely helpful to people.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's the place of human connection, is in the gray,
Mhm.
right? Understand that, right? It's almost my curiosity. Someone says, I want to lose weight. And I've heard people of every size say that, right? So it
Yeah.
has nothing to do with really size. And I have friends of all shapes and sizes who are comfortable or uncomfortable in their bodies, um, despite what society will say.
Mhm.
Um, and it's so intriguing to me. And I'm really, really curious, because we do live in a society that certainly pushes one agenda, or to me feels like it's often pushing one agenda. And over the years, I think I've had parts that were really hopeful that things had changed or gotten better than when I was younger, and I've seen in a lot of ways it sort of only getting worse, and sort of sometimes it can feel like more options out there can be really helpful to people in different ways, and in other ways really give hurtful messages to people. Like, so there can be so much confusion, I think, because in a technology world, I think there's just gotten to be so much more confusion, where I hope there would be sort of more clarity. Like, I don't necessarily see that so much, but it could be that a part of me just sees it that way. um, and again, it varies, right? Some things can be dangerous. In an Instagram world, some of the messaging can be extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And some things can just be confusing, right? So I think the idea that in a field like nutrition, to have more and more people who are not black and white, right? Where someone comes in, let's say, I'm here about weight loss, and then you approach them from a place of curiosity of like, what is it really that you want, though, right?
Right.
What that that's so helpful to people.
Right. And that's where I feel like it's so hard. You can't really separate nutrition and psychology. You just can't, because if somebody's gonna walk in and say, I want to lose weight, why do you want to lose weight? My doctor said I'm unhealthy. Interesting. Can you pursue health without pursuing weight loss? That conversation is outside of the scope of a dietitian.
Mm.
I had a supervisor tell me, I always have a sticky note with my clients in session, and anything that I feel like is out of my scope goes on the sticky note, and I say, can you bring this to your therapist? That is great. I just feel like it's like, but in the moment, you know,
Mhm.
part, whatever you want to call it, that part has been activated, and I so badly want to help the client with it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I really appreciate your boundaries, because I think it's really helpful to people, right? That if it's not in my scope, I want to send them to where it is. But I can still have the curiosity, right? Of like, I so see that it's coming from maybe a place of hurt or confusion, or against societal things, or things you've been told by doctors. And people forget that doctors, again, not because nobody's bad or good, but can have agendas because schools are taught a certain way,
Right.
because a certain time and place seem to indicate something. And a lot in the world is changing, and it can be really helpful, and some fields take longer to progress in certain ways.
Yeah.
um, and so nothing anybody says is necessarily it.
Yeah.
um, be really, really hard, because we've been kind of, right, conditioned to think. And again, that doesn't mean that when it comes to medical advice we ignore it, of course not. But right, there's also within, and when a doctor or anybody of authority will say also, like, kind of how you're saying, right, I'm an authority on nutrition, but I can give it over from a place of, this is not mine, right? A doctor who says, let me check how your organs are functioning, that's mine. And there are concerns because there's research overlap with certain
Mhm.
truth. I don't totally know this. Any professional who speaks that way, who says, right, this might not fully be my scope, or I'm open, I'm curious about this, I'm like, that's somebody to really take very seriously, right? Anybody who can maintain some gray, like that, to me is a great indication of somebody being open to, I don't know everything, I know what I've studied, I don't know.
Right. It brings me back to what you said earlier in the session, like in the beginning, that like nobody, like in the beginning of, let's say, the therapy field, we've made a lot of mistakes, right? But we only made those mistakes because we tried. And
Mhm.
now look at where we are in 2025, right? So it's the same thing with nutrition. Nutrition is a very new science, and we were taught, we learned what we learned, we taught what we taught. It created a lot of eating disorders. We're working backwards now. That's not bad. That is what it is. And thank God we are trying to, I don't know, fix or make it better.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. I really constantly work to not judge an individual. So there aren't specific doctors or nutritionists or therapists that I have any, like beef with, as you'd say. I appreciate all of our fields. I think we're all doing our best. I think we're all in it to be helpful. And just keeping our eyes open and looking for the gray makes a huge difference in just how we're going to present to a person, to see them as a person, as a full person. not about any one thing. And again, we're all going to make mistakes. So the forgiveness to the doctor who said the wrong thing or a hurtful way of saying, even if it was the quote unquote right thing.
Right,
Same nutritionist, the therapist. People are human. They have their parts. They make mistakes,
right,
and it's often coming from a place of really wanting to help. So if there
right,
was a it's say like if there's like a sentence of mine that gets taken out, like that's really important to me. People are, for the most part, they're just not good or bad, and they often are coming from really a place of wanting to protect themselves, to protect others, and they make mistakes because they're coming from parts that feel really protective, and it doesn't necessarily help the next person in the way that they intended.
right, right, right. That's a really nice way of looking at it. I think that's why IFS speaks to me so much and it overlaps so much with intuitive eating. Like I know in your the class that I went to at the Manchester, which was amazing by the way, and it really spoke to me. I was thinking because you said something about how we use IFS with addiction and how um, every part of you is trying to help you, even if it's hurting you. And that to me speaks a lot to eating disorders because I'll tell that to clients and I'll tell it to parents of teenagers, let's say, like, why would she be starving herself? Like she's gonna kill herself, like she's gonna die, God forbid, trigger warning. And it's like because she is numbing on hunger and she doesn't want to feel like whatever she's feeling. And it feels better to be hungry than to feel her emotions. Or she's numbing on fullness. She's disassociating on fullness. She's distracting herself with food. There's so many ways to distract yourself with food. And like it's like normalizing it. Like she's not crazy. She's trying to save herself. That's how she's saving herself, even though it's really hurting her.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, I think in our culture, food has so many things. There are Holocaust
Yeah.
ideas
Yeah.
or hold in either direction of eating, again, whether over or under eating, that can also not even be personal to the person. That's inside of them from generations of feeling like I can't let that go in the garbage. That's terrifying to me. That make so much sense. And as I'm saying, it brings up so much compassion in me of holding that, for generations worth.
Yeah.
Um, from different burdens around that as well. Comfort around food, I think of like when I smell mocha cake, it does make me think of my grandmother, who was one of the greatest people I'll ever know. So, I can't fully separate that kind of smell or sufganiyot, like, from comfort,
Right.
right? I consider that a really good part of me because it brings up memories of my wonderful grandmother who was cooking for my family. It was such pure love. Um, so, what I choose to do with that in the moment, right? Whether that's enjoy one or two sufganiyot or eat 10. So that's a choice I get to make,
Right.
right? And how I'm going to utilize that. And whether it's coming from a place of pain and grief that my grandmother isn't here, or a place of wanting to connect to memory and a place of connection, right? So we get choices in the behaviors, but
Mm.
we have to recognize all this before we can do that, right? So there's so much beauty in our culture around food, right? Yamim Tovim, sometimes even in a family where there's so much trauma, there were beautiful moments, an yantif that's related to food, and people so desperately want to come back to that, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. And again, it can come from a place of connection, and it can come from a place of now the pain came up and I want to dissociate, so I might utilize a behavior that numbs the pain. And I hear you, and I understand that,
Mm.
and probably ultimately um, to feel better in that moment or to feel sort of more even keeled, we would like to get to a place where you can stay in connection rather than go to a place of dissociation. But that's not always going to be possible. And that's okay too.
Right, right. I feel like that gentleness is something that people really need to hear, especially like I'm just speaking from experience. Like, yeah, you binged and it's okay. Like, and it might happen again and you're okay. And do we want it to happen every day? No. Are we working on changing it? Yes, but you're going to be okay. And it's like they're not hearing that, especially inside their own head. It's like you're disgusting. What's wrong with you? You don't just I hear so much of that language. Like it's no one else's fault but yours. Like, why are you talking to yourself like that, especially about a donut? Like, come on, you know?
So is that? Interesting though, because in IFS we work with the critics, right? The self-critics. Richard Schwartz has wonderful YouTubes on working with the critics because we all generally have one, because honestly, from external, we've had one. And what's beautiful about working with critics is they've heard that message generally somewhere. So the shouting in your head is, I rather hurt myself than someone else hurt me. A lot of times they hear that from a critical part of, I'm just doing this so that their mom doesn't do this. So if I tell them that sweater looks awful on you, then they'll change, and right, or we'll change our outfit, and your mom won't say it to you. So it's even a critic where, externally we want to be like, oh my God, don't say that in your head. It's like, why does that part in your head say that to you? What
Mhm.
does it protect you from? I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it's a part you probably so badly want to push away. It's painful.
Right.
Who is protecting you from shame, from discomfort? Can we look at even a critic and say, why are you here? What do you want to protect her from? I get it that you're here for protection too.
Right. So I think it's cool, like because I've learned a lot of psychological modalities that I try to use in session. That again, I'm not a therapist, but at least I could like say that let's take this to your therapist, or let's like open it a tiny bit. Is like at least I feel like I've developed the skill of like mirroring. So like I won't say like no, I will say maybe I'll say something like I notice like you're talking to yourself like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also might be more of a little bit challenge them and say like I just want you to hear what you just said to yourself. Okay. Now imagine saying that to your child, or imagine saying that to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
would you ever talk to me like that? So like I'm not trained as a therapist, but I think that all this stuff has really helped me in working with my clients because like someone's got to say that to them. And some of my clients don't work with therapists and they might not, need to be working with a therapist, but they need someone to mirror that to be like, do you know how mean you sound?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with the message. And I would say something that if you're open to, like keeping in mind, is sort of like, wow, that's a really interesting message you're giving yourself, right? So we're taking the good and bad out of it. I wonder, right? Because I don't
Right.
think you're a therapist, right? To wonder, I wonder,
Yeah.
um, why does it feel helpful to say that to yourself, right? Why does it feel helpful? And they usually do have a right? Because then I won't eat
Yeah.
that. I won't do that.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
you're
Yes.
afraid of doing that. Okay, so can we work with that? That you're afraid of doing that, and perhaps there's a softer way, which is actually working with the part to say, okay, that came in harsh. You had a reason. Would it be okay for you if we came in softer?
Right.
Right? When we come from curiosity, it just softens the language a lot of the time, and it's the same message of whoa, what just
Yeah.
happened? But it's sort of like you had a reason. You wouldn't do that if you didn't have to. If you didn't feel you had to. Okay, so why do you have to? Okay, so you're going to give that over to me as your
Right.
nutritionist. You're
Right.
over to me. What you want to work on is not eating 10 donuts. Okay, so if I can help you understand that better, you might not.
Right. Right. I love that. And that's where I just feel like I hope one day. I think I did read recently that there is going to be a training where it's like you become a dietitian and a therapist, which I really hope they do. One day, maybe like when I work on advocacy, that will be like number one on my list. But I try to do like 100 things, and I'm not doing that now. But I really appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. And I also like it's like a balance because like I'm not a therapist, but I want to help so badly. And I get that not everybody's going to see a dietitian and a therapist. I get that. And there is actually just a plug to my friend Dahlia Abbott, who is a therapist and a dietitian. So I'm just going to put that out there, which I think is amazing. But yeah, you don't somebody asked me a question yesterday and I said the same thing. I'm not a therapist, I'm a dietitian. And he said, yeah, but you're a human. And I'm just asking your opinion on this. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm a human. I get it.
I love that, and I love collaborating. I've had a lot of cases where I collaborated with different nutritionists, and it's a world that I think is super important. I don't know all the science around food, and again, it comes into play when I'm working with clients who have restrictive behaviors. I really want to understand because there are parts of me that will get very responsible and really, really worry about where the danger line is, and I want
Right.
to know, professional,
Right.
where is where is it not, so I can ease that part of myself rather than sort of like ringing alarms in session where it's unnecessary. Just as an example of how I will collaborate with a nutritionist and they will know better than I. And it's so important to the work that I'm doing, right? Because if I am constantly ringing alarm from a part of
Right.
myself, then I'm taking away from that openness that I mean to. But the alarm has to be rung sometimes. If
Yeah.
somebody is in a zone, I need to know what that is.
Yeah.
So beautiful work to collaborate. And I don't disagree that it would be a beautiful thing to have people who do both. It's yeah, it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for coming on. Any parting words before we end?
I really just want to thank you. I know that, this might have like skipped around. So I'm happy for, if there's a way for people to like reach out for any clarity. IFS can be a little bit hard, at least for me, to give over because it is often so experiential. I'm grateful that, like, for examples, because I feel like it brings it out more. And again, as always, I want to say that like my main thing is just really about coming from the gray that, if it sounds like I, have any parts that sort of come down on any side of like, societal things, I really have awareness that all people are really wanting to protect themselves and often others. I'm not going to say that all people want to protect others, but I think that often they do. And there's just messaging that again, through research, through years, we learn like that really wasn't helpful. So I'm appreciative to be somewhere like this because I think 15 years ago, I didn't think somewhere like this would exist, right?
Mhm.
Where we're together, our fields are coming together in a real effort to find the gray. I'm so grateful for that. And I hope that that's what I've given over because that's my message, really.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, and where could people find you if they would like to hear more or work with you?
Yeah, so my email is Caryn.Gutman@gmail. So for like reaching out, that's a good way. I'm pretty responsive. I am on Instagram. I think it's Caryn_Gutman Weber.
Okay,
Um,
I'll get your information. I'll put it in the show notes so people can find you. Yeah. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see more of you, like your live classes. And if you do any more live classes, I'm happy to, put it on my status and tell people about it.
thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Okay, have a great day.